One sec. Let's see.
Good.
Hang on, I'm waiting for Ed to just make sure the stream is up.
Got it.
Okay, awesome. We are live. So thank you guys for tuning in. We got a Chaski masterclass here with Heike McNeil. She is out in Oregon, and she's going to be talking to us today about training and competing as a post-breast cancer survivor. So Heike will give a lot more of her background, but she is a coach and a runner herself, and was diagnosed and treated and is now healthy and post breast cancer, which we're all really happy about for her. She's also a PhD. So lots and lots to learn. I'm super excited. And so I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to turn it over to her. And she's going to lead through this talk. So thank you for tuning in. If you've got questions, feel free to put that in the chat. I'll be emceeing here a little bit, and can lead a little bit of Q&A at the end. So Heike, let's just turn it over to you and let's get this rolling.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you guys for having me at Chaski, and thank you for tuning in and listening. So I'm hoping that this talk is going to be a little bit of a window for those that have been diagnosed to see the world post breast cancer and kind of get a start on navigating some of the challenges. And also, truly, in a way, it's a little bit of something that all women in pre-menopause or like peri or post-menopause more so, can use to be kind of feeling a little bit stronger and more competitive again. So a little bit about myself. Tyler kind of gave me a good introduction here. I'm originally a PhD in chemistry and then was retrained as an exercise physiologist. I coached at Northwest Christian University for 15 years, and we were a tiny school of about 600 students total, and we ended up winning a national title in women's cross country with kind of a little bit of a unique approach to coaching that's just very like individualized and personalized. So we'll talk maybe more about that a little bit later. So basically, I'm kind of starting here my slideshow and talking about the whole cancer thing, right? I had just retired from collegiate coaching, went back to full-time faculty, and started being competitive again, started competing. And, at all of a sudden at age 45, I was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of breast cancer. And essentially, I have the BRCA gene. So I learned later that you have an 80 to 90% chance of getting cancer by age 40 if you have that gene. So I guess I made it to 45. I don't know what that means. But, I really obviously struggled with that diagnosis a lot, and kind of went from being an athlete to being a patient. And if you're like me, a lot of athletes don't make really good patients. Plus, my diagnosis occurred in 2020, which was also the COVID year. So I was diagnosed in February, and in surgery, since the cancer was super aggressive, I had a double mastectomy. And then, everything, the whole world kind of got turned upside down as I started chemotherapy kind of through June, and then radiation July. And then because of my genetics, I also had to have a hysterectomy and an oophorectomy to get ovaries out. And basically, that was a whole year of treatment, and it was a very frustrating year. Of course, overwhelmingly, a year of a lot of gratefulness to get through this and to be able to go past that, but also left me with a lot of questions. So during my treatment, I kind of did a lot of research on like, what do you do? Can you exercise? I've kind of had, my experience was that my oncologist didn't have a ton of experience. My oncologist was wonderful. He was very pro, like, keep running, that's what keeps you going. You need to keep doing your thing. But he didn't really have any guidelines. So I did some research and found some data mainly done on Scandinavian women that were actually like high level cross-country ski athletes. And they were able to keep going through chemo. And I was like, really? Okay. So, they put them through hard workouts, like hardcore cardio and really heavy weightlifting workouts. And so that was a little bit of my inspiration, as, we all kind of made it through COVID, and it like kept me mentally sane, I would say. I'm not sure I was sane all the time, but mostly sane. I had my dogs and I would go running every day, and it was just like kind of like a part of my routine. And little did I know that, when we kind of looked at all of my like blood tests and my data, that it just made chemo so much better for me. And obviously everybody's different, but it was more tolerable. My white blood cell counts would come back just like right after treatment. In fact, when I finished chemo, which is kind of when your body is supposed to be at its lowest, I think I had my blood test 5 days later, and my oncologist said, well, your immune system's back to normal. And so, according to my doctors, the running and the activity helped me be less fatigued. And just kind of get through things in a little bit of a better way. And running, fortunately, was one of the things that you were still able to do during the pandemic with maybe, a couple of people or so. So really, the big struggle for me was to kind of figure out, what was going on with my body. And 80% of breast cancer is hormone dependent. So it's some sort of estrogen dependence. And so to control that, what they do is obviously like you have medically induced menopause through chemo, which turns your hormones upside down, but then they block your hormones. So for me, I started on tamoxifen and then was shifted to anastrozole. And the hormonal changes were enormous. And in later researching this, I found that I basically went through like menopause that takes like years, maybe up to 10 years for some women. I did that overnight. And so for me, some of those changes were like really, really obvious. So, the classic ones were like the crazy hot flashes, like 20 a day. And, they're still there, but maybe not as bad. They're more manageable sometimes than other times. I found that my muscle was different. Like apparently you start storing, especially chemo helps with this too, storing a lot more fat in your muscle fibers. My digestive system was turned totally upside down. Frustratingly, a lot of the the fuel I used for trail running for some of the longer runs, I was a huge fan of Tailwind, and my stomach was always sensitive. So I always had a hard time, eating solid foods. So Tailwind had always been my answer, and my body was not tolerating that anymore at all. In fact, I would drink Tailwind post cancer, and my stomach would just bloat and it would just like slosh around in there. And I experimented with different concentrations, and you look at the research and it says you need a 6% carbohydrate solution, and none of that worked. So digestive system was a mess. And also my body didn't really respond to training. I'd been a coach for 20 years, and no matter what I did, like I just was the same. I had muscle and joint pain, which is kind of the classic, like it's very typical for tamoxifen and any estrogen blockers, but also like with menopause, right? And I was and still am incredibly heat intolerant. So you can imagine like going out on a run and it's kind of warm, and then you get a hot flash in the middle of the run, and you kind of like, boy, what am I supposed to do? Like, I feel awful. I need to stop. I need to just sit down. It's quite challenging to experience that, and I just really couldn't deal with heat at all. And then there's the menopause, like, weight gain that just kind of like, around your middle. And I was like, I do not even recognize myself. I don't know what's going on anymore. And of course, I started asking myself all the questions, beginning with, will I be an athlete again? Like, is this just how my body is? And the truth is, it wasn't like horrible. I was just like slower and different, and, I'm fine. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm very grateful, and was grateful at the time that I was done with treatment and was cancer free. But I always asked the question, like, can I change some of these things? Right. And so then, being an exercise physiologist, I was like wondering, I wanted to know, like, what is going on? Why is my body just not responding to anything? Why am I slow? There's nothing wrong with being slow at all. The hardest part was, though, I couldn't run with my friends, because every time I would run with my friends, my base pace was so much slower that I tried running with them, and it was like my hard day. It was like a hard day of workout to run with, my regular group of friends. And I was like, it'd be really nice to be able to run with my normal group again, just for an easy run. Really wanted to know what's wrong with my usual fuels. I was sore all the time, and just kind of trying to answer some of the questions of what, this tamoxifen and estradiol is doing, and what, kind of the chemo did to my body in a lasting way. So, doing some of the research, I've really kind of concluded that my hormones are nuts. Like, they just were not working. But, I've always, and this kind of goes back to coaching, I've, when I had my team, my national championship team, we were a tiny team, and I had to get every one of these athletes to run at their best. And how did I do that? Well, trial and error, right? Try to figure out what works, and listen to the responses that the body gives you. So I decided, I can do that on myself, which is sometimes remarkably harder when you do that for yourself than when you do it to an athlete that you can monitor. But I started making some changes and tried to see how my body responds. And obviously this was kind of a long story, but there was definitely a take home from all of this. And the first thing I learned was that I needed to approach strength training differently. So, we're mostly aware that typically for your body to respond to strength training and to build muscle, that's kind of a testosterone thing, right? Which is related really to estrogens and other hormones. And if they're not circulating in your body, it's really difficult to still maintain muscle mass and gain muscle mass. On the other hand, that's also really important, right? Because you're now talking about like postmenopausal at an early time in life, and you're talking about your bone density being really important, right? So weights are really an important thing. So I really was determined to figure this out. And what I learned was that I needed to just lift much heavier than I ever had. Because it turns out that there's actually a mechanical stimulus, and there's a threshold. So if you kind of lift and push the weight harder, then just from that stretch, the muscle actually starts building. And it worked, right? So what's crazy was I improved with that my muscle pain, like all the joint pain and stuff. I think it was mostly just things were kind of a little out of whack, but because of all the things that were going on in my body, it was sort of like magnified. And so just gaining my muscle mass back and just being able to, be strong and be a little bit more resilient again, injury prevention was really a really big deal. And I learned too that, if I just put a muscle through its full range of motion, it doesn't hurt anymore. So kind of interesting. Again, not everybody's the same. We're all different, but these are just things that I drew from my own experience and from trial and error, as I said. So, and when I say lift heavy, so I'm not a big person. I'm like 5'4" and a buck and a quarter. And I did work my way up to doing deadlifts at like probably about 200, 220. So which is a lot for a runner, not a lot for somebody that lifts weights regularly, right? But for distance runners is heavy, right? So so that's kind of how I got started on that, and really made myself more resilient to start with. And then I kind of tried to work on, what works for me. How can my body be responding again? And during my years of coaching, I learned that some people are very aerobic and some people are very anaerobic responders. And what I mean by that is, some people, and probably some of you here listening, are the aerobic responders that like love tempo runs, long runs, right? And that really like changes how your body responds. Like you prepare for a season, you do all the base and the long runs, and you're actually at like 80 or so % of where you're going to be that season. And then there's the anaerobic responder, and that's what I've always been. I can do long runs until the cows come home, and it really doesn't do a whole lot to my body. I've always had to be like, let's start with some 200s and then some 400s. And so I kind of decided, I'm just going to go all out on this. And I contacted our university sprints coach that I coached with for many years. And I said, hey, is there any way I can come do some of the stuff that you guys are doing? Because I kind of need to like work on my running mechanics. And I just want to get faster again. Like I'm tired of, kind of like puttering around. And so I committed to 8 weeks of 3 times a week of training with the sprinters, which when I say that, it sounds like I was sprinting. I guarantee you I was not. It was by far one of the most humbling experiences in my life, because definitely, I was way behind everybody. But, for a distance runner, I was sprinting, if I can put that under like air quotes, right? And the changes were remarkable. I felt it even, I didn't do a whole lot of distance during those 8 weeks, but I did my warm-ups of still like a couple miles, 2 or 3 or so, and I've all of a sudden realized they felt easier, and I actually started like improving my base pace by a lot. And here pretty soon I was running with my friends again, and I was just kind of floored by that. And I don't sprint anymore, but I do some faster things. Like I listed my favorite workout here. I don't know why I put that on there, just had to because it's fun. Basically a 30-30 workout, so it's 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy. I do 6 of those, and then I take a 3-minute jog recovery, and I do that 4 times. And that's kind of my maintenance of my faster stuff to give my muscle some of that stimulus. So the crazy part was, there's still a couple of pieces missing, but I was doing much, much, much better. And then I read this book, and if you're at all either like post-cancer, going through treatment, or perimenopause, post-menopause, you need to read this book. It's called Next Level by Dr. Sims. She's a fellow exercise physiologist out of Australia. And this is where it kind of blew my mind, because she essentially goes through and talks about all those changes. And her recommendations are these first 2. The first that she calls sit training, and that's sprint interval training. And then her second piece is lift heavy shit. Okay. So in a way, she like, in the first few pages confirmed what I was doing. And I was like, oh my goodness, no wonder this was working. The last piece she talks about is the gut health, that I really hadn't found a ton, other than kind of your basic, like, things change when you go through these changes. And the last part that, kind of put things together for me was my nutrient timing and protein intake. And I realized that in this different hormonal state, you have a much higher need for protein, especially if you're trying to like maintain and gain that muscle mass. The other piece was I was so frustrated with my blood sugar. I would go to my doctor appointments and get these blood tests, and the blood sugar was always high. And, I didn't tell the oncologist this, but I would go in there fasted because I was like, I need to see if I can get to a normal blood sugar. This is ridiculous. And when I finally talked to him about this, I said, my blood sugar is totally a mess. Why don't you tell people this? Like, apparently this is something that happens. And he's like, yeah, we don't tell people because most people don't have an advanced degree in exercise physiology. And I was like, well, I think everybody needs to know this, right? So I started experimenting and working and kind of actually following some of what Dr. Sims says in her book, where I changed some things around. Like, obviously, still need a lot of carbohydrate fuels for my, lifting and running. But it's the timing. Like, you can eat the carbohydrates just before and just after, but then dinner specifically, you just have to have a higher protein and less carbohydrates. And just doing that, just that one change, just not eating as many carbohydrates at night. And by doing that, I don't mean anything super extreme. It was more like, if there's like rice and chicken, I would just eat less of the rice and more of the chicken kind of thing. But that really made the last part of the difference, where I finally saw some changes in my energy, like way more energy, like kind of almost back to normal. Like, okay, I feel normal again. Because, honestly, for 3 years, I wasn't sure what normal was, because it's redefined by when you go through, your body goes through a year of like being broken down and being bombarded and essentially being kicked in the gut every day. So I saw some of these energy levels coming back, and my body composition too. So I think the lesson from this, and the big piece that I learned is more so than ever, I believe in truly feedback driven training. I know and understand that I've worked in this field of exercise physiology for long enough to know that we're all different. Every body responds a little bit different, but there's feedback. If you write things down, if you look at your results, record what you do, and then respond to your results, and just keep trying to find information of what your body's going through, you will see results. You will see that you can change your training given the feedback. And it's actually really cool to see, cancer or not, like healthy athletes doing that now, where they're changing the training and really listening to more of like what their body is doing and how their body responds to some of the things, and realizing that, just because somebody else is doing this workout regimen and they're really good and you'd like to be as good as they are, that doesn't mean that works for you as well, right? So really letting your very own response inform and guide your next steps of training. And, I think I should have started with this, but really where I was like looking at this quote that says, doing the same thing and expecting different results is the very definition of insanity, right? It's insane for me to say, okay, well, I'm a coach. I've done this. This is how my body works. This is how it's always worked. I'm going to keep doing this, and it's not working. So I'm going to do more of it, right? I'm going to just run more, lift more, and do all that stuff. And it didn't work. So really, again, I had to take that step back and let the feedback drive my training. So, if you try to apply that to yourself, is really just, you have to look at your very own training history, right? And what I mean by letting feedback control your training is your feedback, your body will tell you like how many days a week it can run, like weekly mileage is like such a classic example of that. Is like, is when people think they need to run a certain amount of mileage. And really, I firmly believe everybody has some sort of a sweet spot where this is what they're good at. If they go too much less, they're not going to be at their best. If they go way over, they're going to constantly be injured or, tired, fatigued, and not being able to pull off some of their workouts. The same thing goes for training paces and intensities. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to follow the classic, oh, here's your tempo, your 10K, your 5K pace. Like, you can kind of work with that and experiment and see, what your body's letting you do and what your body wants to do. And then also kind of talking about, putting in the strength training. And I think that more and more, the longer I do this, the more I believe that that's really important, and that we're seeing, with both the higher intensity and the strength training, we're seeing improvement in even endurance. So it's more of like a muscle fiber thing that really crosses that barrier from the anaerobic to the aerobic training. How much cross training should you do? And again, tracking all of that, I think, is really the key piece, because when you are able to track the responses, which may not be like a matter of like days or weeks, it can be a longer time, then you're able to adjust. So really, I wanted to re-emphasize at the end of this that this is not about being fast, even though for me, that's a little bit how it started, is that frustration of like, I'm not fast anymore and I don't like it, right? But really, like, this is so much more, right? This is about being more resilient in not just resilient to injuries, but resilient in life, right? I mean, it's cancer is a horrible and traumatic thing to go through, and to kind of have something that you can hold on to, or even that you can go back to and say, I can still do this, is really actually quite empowering, if you want to say so. It's about being strong enough to do what you love to do, right? It's about, like, after such a traumatic experience, to go back and do what it is that you love to do, right? Like, I love to run. I love to go run up a mountain. I don't love going halfway up the mountain, feel like I'm going to die enough to turn around, right? I want to go all the way up. It's about having more energy to do life and to live your life to the fullest, and not have to say, I don't think my body is be able to do that anymore. Like, think again. It just might, right? It's about having your life that's fulfilled after cancer, and giving your body also, of course, the best chance to remain cancer-free. And ultimately, that's kind of the big goal, obviously, which, again, if you look at the research, it's stunning how much of an impact exercise has on that, and how much of a better chance you can give yourself to remain cancer-free. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, none of us can say that we're never going to get cancer, or that cancer is never going to come back. But, like, you just try to improve your chances. And that's, that's pretty much all we can do, and what exercise can do. So, are there any questions? Tyler, did you have any things?
Yeah. Hey, Heike, that was so awesome. It was funny. I was actually just listening to a podcast with Devin Yanko, her Women of Distance podcast, and she was talking about that same Stacy Sims book. So I think I need to put it on my to-read list. As a male athlete, I think sometimes the women's health stuff, it's not taught in the same way that just general coaching stuff is. And I think it's really fascinating. Stacy Sims is just like everybody loves her. She's so awesome.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a superhero. So, okay. Couple questions. I think one of the more common ones I'm seeing here is basically about, mentally how you approached, just the idea of running when you were undergoing treatment. Was this something that, as a competitive athlete, you felt almost disheartened by, or was it a relief of stress to be able to still do these things?
That's a really good question. So like, I think my treatment year, I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, I just ran and everything was fine. It was, I think my favorite word during that time was shit show, because I was, that's what I was. I mean, I'm truly like, I was a mess. You know, and I think I just like, I felt like my body betrayed me. Like, I just felt like I'm so healthy. You know, I haven't even eaten anything that's not organic in like 10 years. And like, you know, it's like you do all the things and then this. So I think that was the worst part. And so I was actually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome from my diagnosis. And so it, like, I was a mess, and I literally laid in bed in the morning, and my dogs, I have these 2 enormous dogs, they would jump in bed with me, and, you know, they just kind of be like, hey mom, let's go. And so I pretty much like, that was my initial, like, I need to get out. Right. So I took them for runs, and then, you know, I kind of, it was like more of like a motivator to be like, you know, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to see if I can do it while running. And it was like the best part of my day, to be honest. Like, it was the one time where I didn't like focus on like the shit show, right? Like, yeah. I ran, and I felt good. I really didn't pay attention to how fast, how long, anything. I just went. And there was days where it was hard. They didn't realize until my second round of chemo that my body regenerated so quickly. They didn't need to give me the immune boost. But when they did the first time, it made my white blood cells like go through the roof. The count was like 30, which is completely insane. And it was like, I can't even, like, I was so dizzy. And like everything just like throbbed in my whole body when I was running. That was like one of the days where I was like, okay, I should probably not do this right now. But literally most every day, I felt like that was the highlight of my day. That was the best part. And that was kind of almost like what got me through, you know, like to the point where even on treatment days, I'd get up early in the morning and do a run just because I like actually felt good.
That's great. Yeah. Another question, I guess this could be to someone who's in treatment now, or to, you know, kind of looking back, if you could give yourself one piece of advice, or give one piece of advice to people who might be in the same situation as you, like early in the diagnosis or treatment stage, what advice would you give?
Believe there is life after cancer. I think it's just like it's so hard. It's such a big word. It's such a heavy diagnosis, right? And yet, especially with breast cancer, and there's so much, you know, that we've done, even for women who are completely metastasized, where they still have like a really good quality of life. And I think that was my biggest fear the whole time. Like with every new chemo, I was like, what is this going to do to my body? Like, what is it going to take away from me now? Right. Like how am I going to like come back and be able to do things again that I enjoy? And I think that like, I wish I would have known like it's okay, right? Your body can regenerate and it comes back. Like it takes a while, you know, and I had people that told me like, it'll take you a couple years before you feel normal again. But you just don't know that. You don't really, I don't know, maybe sometimes you don't really want to believe that because it just seems so horrible. And, you know, and obviously it's a terrible disease, and like everybody's experience with it is different, and it's at different levels and different stages and whatnot. But it's very highly treatable, meaning that, you know, even if it's something that is just not going to go away, you can still have like a good quality of life. So
that's really great to hear. As a coach, have you learned things either about yourself and your body that you have taken to apply to the athletes you coach now?
You know, it's funny. I think what this experience did for me, even more so, I was always kind of very firm that really everybody's different and everybody responds differently. And there isn't like one program that works for everybody, but it's more so now, even because I feel like I almost feel like I don't know anything. I just want data. I just want to see what your body's doing, you know, because like all the crazy things my body has done, where it's just like, this doesn't even seem possible, right? Like, it doesn't even seem possible that I can still like gain muscle back, and and like it's just, you never know. Everybody's different, and really what I learned is our bodies are amazing. I mean, they're just so resilient, and they can do crazy stuff and really cool things. So yeah,
that's a fantastic lesson. And one of the things that you and I have been talking about is the idea of working with women who are currently undergoing this type of treatment, and leading them through some run coaching yourself. So tell us a little bit about why that idea was exciting to you, and what you think you can accomplish as a coach working with people who are currently undergoing treatment.
I think this is something that I just really feel strongly would love to bring more attention to. Is it's everywhere. I mean, even just today, I've had a couple people who lost a loved one to cancer, and it's so common. And I think that it's so, exercise and running is such a powerful tool, because it's not just the physical part. They've done a study that was published about this time last year, where they said, like, exercise, like, kind of split into the cardiovascular and strength exercise being the number one biggest indicators of longevity and health for somebody. And we don't utilize that. We don't tell cancer patients, like, you can make this journey a lot better. Like, this isn't going to be fun, but you can embrace the suck, and you can just really make your life a lot better, and go through it with also a goal. And I think that was really big for me too, is to kind of be like, my favorite race in the whole world is the Broken Arrow Sky Race down at Tahoe. And it was like, there's so many days when I just like would lay in my bed and just be like, I am going to run that thing again. I'm going to run down in Tahoe again. I'm going to run Broken Arrow, and no matter what is going to happen. And if I walk half of it, I don't care, but having those goals and having something like that is really important. And I just really feel called to like help people see that. And, whether it's something where they've never really done anything, and this cancer is kind of a start for them to be like, I would like to train for a 5K. Let's see what your body lets you do. Let's see, where you can go, because, with any type of exercise is going to make the whole thing better. And, there's got to be lots of athletes that were like me and kind of like, why did this happen and what is going on? It's like, I'm not ready to not be competitive anymore. So, wherever somebody is, I feel like that's like a pretty big spectrum. I think, this can be really helpful. And I would love to just pass on some of the experiences I've made, some of the lessons I've learned, and, the combination of having gone through it and having been a coach for a long time. So yeah, I mean, I think I would love to work with some women, and help them change their lives for the positive, and help them get through this horrendous time.
Yeah, it's so powerful, that idea of having a goal that's beyond cancer, of getting back to something that you've done, or accomplishing something even that you haven't done. I think that is just so powerful and so motivating. So yeah, no, I love that. Any last thoughts, things you want to leave us with here, about yourself or about your journey?
Maybe just an encouragement of, like, believe that your body is amazing and that it can heal itself. And, with modern medicine, you can, the world's open and things may be different, but that's not necessarily a bad different. It can be also really, really cool to see what you're still able to do. So.
Amazing. Hey, thank you so much, Heike. This has been really great. I've learned a lot. I know I need to go get that Stacy Sims book now. That's going to be my next thing I do. So yeah, 2 recommendations in like a couple hours for the same book. That's a new one. So Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, your story is just amazing and inspiring to others. And yeah, I can't wait to see how you continue to inspire and change the lives of some people. So thank you for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.